Hey guys, Thomas here from Train Fully. In this video, I'm showing you the top 3 stretches to do prior to a round of golf. Now, this isn't just some random collection of movements thrown together for the purpose of getting your muscles warm. Our approach is very targeted. We select our techniques based on complex kinesiology and advanced biomechanics. All right, so this is an active stretch for subscapularis, pectoralis major, and pectoralis minor. These 3 muscles have a propensity to become tight, and when they do, they restrict shoulder external rotation, which will then interfere with both your backswing and your follow through. Now, I'm laying on a foam roller. If you don't have one, you can roll up a towel or a yoga mat. I've placed my hands behind my head to posteriorly tilt and upwardly rotate my shoulder blades. This stretches my pectoralis minor. My pectoralis major is being stretched because my shoulders are horizontally abducted, and subscapularis is being stretched because my shoulders are externally rotated. Once I'm in that position, all I have to do is squeeze my shoulder blades together, trying to bring my elbows to the floor. And I hold that position for 2 to 4 seconds and then relax. And I do this 12 to 20 times. So I'm contracting the muscles on the posterior side of my shoulder girdle to pull the muscles on the anterior side through their full range of motion. But why am I doing this? What is the point of active stretching? Well, we get 3 main benefits from active stretching. 1, we increase the extensibility of the muscles that we're stretching. 2, we increase end range strength of the functional antagonists, which are the opposing muscles on the other side of the joint. And 3, we reinforce optimum reciprocal inhibition. Reciprocal inhibition is a reflex that inhibits opposing muscles during movement. When we contract a muscle on one side of the joint, we need the opposing muscle to relax. And that contract-relax companionship between opposing muscles is controlled by reciprocal inhibition. The athletes that move the fastest and have the most accuracy are the ones with optimum reciprocal inhibition. So as I squeeze my shoulder blades together to bring my elbows down to the floor, I'm contracting my infraspinatus, teres minor, and my mid and lower trapezius muscles, which reciprocally inhibits my subscapularis, pectoralis major, and pectoralis minor. This active stretch will not only improve your shoulder external rotation, it will also improve your reflexes and your coordination. It will therefore make your swing faster and more accurate. If you're struggling with getting enough depth in your backswing or maintaining your angles, this stretch is for you. Again, perform 1 set of 12 to 20 repetitions, holding the end range for 2 to 4 seconds. All right, now this is an active stretch for the hip flexor complex. The position we're in for the active hip flexor stretch and static hip flexor stretch is the same. I have good neutral alignment through my spine. The front leg is at 90 degrees of hip flexion and 90 degrees of knee flexion. Notice that on my back leg, my ankle is dorsiflexed and the ball of my foot is dug into the ground. Doing that puts my knee into a little bit of flexion, which then in turn puts my rectus femoris on stretch, which is part of the hip flexor complex. Now, take a look at my hip. I'm not leaning forward. We only have about 10 degrees of hip extension, and we don't want to go beyond that. So I'm starting at 0 degrees of hip extension. Now remember, with active stretching, we're contracting the opposing muscles to increase our range of motion, strengthen our end range, and increase our coordination by reinforcing optimum reciprocal inhibition. So for stretching the hip flexors, the opposing muscles will be the hip extensors. And the primary hip extensor is the gluteus maximus. So I'm contracting my gluteus maximus, which pulls my pelvis into a posterior pelvic tilt. And a posterior pelvic tilt is relative hip extension. So I don't need to move my femur to extend my hip. I can move my pelvis. I can contract my glutes and tuck my pelvis underneath. And as I do that, my anterior superior iliac spine moves backwards and my hip flexors are put on stretch. I hold that end range for 2 to 4 seconds and then relax. And I complete 12 to 20 repetitions. Now, this stretch will improve your hip internal rotation because when the hip flexors become tight, they pull the femoral head anterior superior inside the acetabulum, which changes the way that the surfaces of the ball and socket line up and move relative to each other. This is called arthrokinetic dyskinesis. This increases wear and tear on the joint and reduces your range of motion, especially internal rotation. So if you've been struggling with excessive lateral slide, early extension, or hanging back, this stretch is for you. This stretch will also increase the activity of your gluteus maximus and enhance the coordination of the muscles around your pelvis. Perform one set of 12 to 20 repetitions, holding the end range for 2 to 4 seconds. All right, now this is one of my favorite movements. This is called the open book. I'm laying on my side with my bottom leg straight so that my head, spine, hip, knee, and ankle are all in a straight line. I have the foot of my top leg hooked behind my bottom knee, and I have a foam roller under my top knee to make it level with my hip. If you don't have a foam roller, you can use a pillow. My top hip is flexed to slightly above 90 degrees, and my bottom hand is holding on to my top knee to ensure that I maintain that position. I have my top hand behind my head. As I roll forward, I'm trying to touch my elbow to the floor and hold that for 2 seconds. This is called horizontal adduction of the shoulder and upward rotation and protraction of the shoulder blade, which are the joint actions of our lead shoulder and shoulder blade during our backswing, and trail shoulder and shoulder blade during our follow through. This stretches the posterior deltoid and rhomboids. Now, as I roll backward, I'm trying to lay the back of my arm flat on the ground and hold that for 2 seconds. This is abduction, horizontal abduction, and external rotation of the shoulder and upward rotation and posterior tipping of the shoulder blade, which are the joint actions of our trail shoulder and shoulder blade during our backswing, and lead shoulder and shoulder blade during our follow through. This stretches pectoralis major, pectoralis minor, and subscapularis. Rolling back also stretches the piriformis muscle at the hip. The piriformis is the primary external rotator of the hip, so by stretching it, we're improving our hip internal rotation. All right, so that's the muscles. What about the spine? Well, this is a great mobilization for the thoracic spine, specifically for the facet joints. Most of us have way too much flexion in our thoracic spine, which is called excessive kyphosis. This posture changes the way the facet joints line up and move relative to each other. Now, the facet joints are gliding joints, and if they don't line up correctly, they won't be able to glide properly. This is called arthrokinetic dyskinesis. This increases wear and tear on your spine and reduces your ability to rotate your upper body. When we roll back, we are rotating and extending our spine, which is a mobilization for those facet joints. We're also mobilizing the SI joint as we roll back, which is the joint between our hip and our spine. This movement, again, it's one of my all-time favorites. It will improve every aspect of your swing. If you're having a hard time being consistent and maintaining your angles, this movement is for you. Perform one set of 12 to 20 repetitions on each side, holding the end ranges for 2 seconds. All right, guys, there you have it. Those are the top 3 stretches to do prior to a round of golf. We start with an active stretch for subscapularis, pec major, and pec minor. Then we move on to an active stretch for the hip flexor complex, and finally, a mobilization for the thoracic spine. Doing those 3 things is going to enhance the extensibility of muscles that tend to restrict the golf swing. It's going to improve the end range strength and activity of muscles that we need to pull our body through its full range of motion as we move through our swing sequence. And it's going to enhance our neuromuscular coordination. All of that adds up to a faster and more accurate swing. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching.